Hello, it's been a bit of time. I was on holiday, but I'm back now. I did some work over holiday, and this is the kind of current state of the game. I don't actually have the PNG that I was going to load. Let me get that. This guy. I made him quickly earlier today. If I load him in, there we go. So we got this man who loads in via the asset cache, and then he also gets erased. It doesn't really tell you that because the window goes away too early, but he does get erased properly and stuff. And also, you know, input works and all that. If I plug in my Xbox One controller, then over here you see joystick connected ID 0. And then if I press, you know, left and right on the D-pad, we have -1 for when we move left, 1 for when we move right, and it moves left and right properly. And all that with the controller D-pad. Currently that's all there is, but it's quite cool, I think. So if I go into Rider, I just kind of want to show you what I added. You can look through like the repo commits and stuff, but I want to in this video at this time, whatever, I want to kind of revamp the input manager, because currently I'm kind of putting axes for like controller thumbsticks and triggers and stuff into like the same thing that actions are, like buttons, and I want to separate them out because Unreal Engine, before its current enhanced input action system, it used to have just a normal action system. Well, I say normal, it had a system where you have action mappings, which are just buttons you press, so they can be pressed or not pressed, you know, those two states, and axes mappings or axis mappings, which are scalar. They go from -1 to 1. So for example, when you're pushing up on the left joystick on a controller, that would be 1 on the y-axis of that joystick, and then down would be -1 on the y-axis. And that's how you would do, you know, scalar values and stuff. So I've got here in this key structure is I've basically just made it into both an action and a axis, but I want to separate it out into the actions and the axes. But I also want to allow actions to act as axes, so that, for example, you have a button press and you can say whenever this button is down, treat it as if it's this value on the scalar. So whenever a button is down, treat it as 1, or treat it as 0.5 or -0.25 or something. So then you can simulate a scalar value essentially going from 0 to the target value immediately. Or I could just do that for everything. I could just say that everything is a scalar value, and you know, you have a target. No, actually, no, I don't want to do that. So yeah, separating it between the things. And this is also how I did the Xbox controller, because if you've looked at SFML, you know that there's a joystick thing, and this joystick class just gives you enums and stuff like that, and they're all very kind of generic things, right? Like the x-axis, the y-axis, the r-axis, the u-axis. It's all very very universal, because obviously it needs to support as much as possible, but it can't kind of be super specific about each thing, which is like what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm specifying the things that map to the stuff. So this enum class for the Xbox buttons allow you to select a button on the Xbox controller, and they're in the same order that the actual like ints are for the SFML joystick thing, because buttons have an int associated with them, so that you can say, you know, button number 2 is the X button or something, right? Because you have 0, 1, 2. And yeah, so basically it just takes the Xbox button enum and turns it into an integer, feeds it into the is button pressed, and you know, off you go really. So that's how you check if an action is pressed. By this, you just see if it's pressed in the key checks what device it's using, if it's, you know, a keyboard, a mouse, or a controller, and selects the correct function based off that. So the key is already an abstraction for any kind of input. So I'm thinking we have a key and we have an axis. The key structure will be for actions and the axis structure will be for axis mappings. Yeah, and also the Xbox axis is the kind of friendly abstracted names for the Xbox stuff mapped to whatever the joystick generic things are, really. And also the LT and RT, the left trigger and right trigger, use the same axis, they just have inverted values. So the right trigger is value of 100. The right trigger goes from 0 to 100, the left trigger goes from 0 to minus 100. So they both use the same axis, they just use two different ranges on that same axis, which makes sense, but it's going to be a bit more difficult to make them work, I think. But we'll probably be able to get it down right fine. So the axis, the action, do I just keep it as S key, or do I change it to, like, you know, S action or something? Because obviously this map is a map of actions. Yeah, I'm thinking a key is something which can be down or up, one of the two. Whereas an axis is something that has a range of values. And so then you have an action which is mapped to keys, and something else axes, or something which is mapped to axes. So I'm thinking having two maps, one for the actions, one for the axes, or having both. How would you do that though? Because obviously you could make an action, like let's say you want to move left and right, you'd make an axis. Yeah, okay, so to be able to move left and right, it'd be an axis mapping. So, you know, let's say move X, for example. We have, it's an axis mapping, and we want to say we want to use D-pad X for the left and the right. We also want to use the left arrow and the right arrow. So to be able to use the D-pad X, we can just specify, you know, use this and all of its range of motion. For the left and the right, we're going to specify the actual, like, value, right? So we can say this is 1 and this is -1. And then this will just use its default. Let's see how that goes. And I'm thinking we have a base kind of S key. So the key is any kind of input. And then the base key will just be used for the device and the code. And then it will have a child for axis key or key axis or something, which will add the scalar, the dead zone maybe, and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that all makes sense. So if I make another also, yeah, Ryder's doing this. I don't understand why. Let's try to go back to it and see if it... Nope, it acts... For some reason, sometimes Ryder decides to just make tabs be a single space instead of 4 spaces. I'm pressing tab and it's just doing 1 space. I don't understand. I don't get why it does this sometimes. I assume it's going to be under like what? Code style, tabs and indents. No, what? Yeah, use spaces and 4. To this computer. Then why is it only doing 1? What? Why? What? Is something implicitly saying in this file only? Because in other files, it works just fine. Look at that, we have 4 spaces for a tab. But in this, no. 1 space for a tab. I don't understand. I don't understand. Is there settings for specific files? Why this certain file? This can be such a pain to deal with. Fine, auto detect set. Why are you taking me to a website? No, I don't want to auto detect. I want to specify this and force you to use it. Align even if the resulting indentation is too large. Allow alignment if a construct is located too far right. But that's not anything to do with this. To only view code style rules that affect the selected code block. I'll enter then choose format cleanup. Okay. Format cleanup. Configure code style. So this is saying align. What? But that. What? That's got nothing to do with the tabbing. Re-indent it. What? Okay, well I'm just going to fight with it, I suppose. So we're going to have key axis, which will be a child of just key. Okay. And obviously this is final, so we need to make it not final. So what we want is to have the scalar be here and not here. And maybe a dead zone on top of that as well. I can add the dead zone. No, let's have a dead zone. Let's do that. Dead zone. Nice. Set device is pressed. Can probably stay fine. However, so this seems to be. Why is it working fine now? Why is it suddenly switched again? Goodness me. Get scalar amount here. Can we just say what was it? The joystick. Get axis position of 0 and the axis being code. But code needs to be cast to joystick axis. There we go. You know what, screw it, I'm going to put this in a thing, there we go, and return this. Cool, so again the scalar amount, we don't need this anymore, is scalar active. We'll probably just call it is active actually. And say, I don't know where the is scalar active is. I was just saying if it's greater than the dead zone or less than. Just say if gets scalar amounts is greater than or equal to the absolute of the dead zone. Or actually the absolute of the scalar amount as well. So the absolute of the scalar amount would just make it positive all the time, greater than or equal to the absolute of the dead zone, which will be positive. To make them both positive, see if scalar amount is greater, if it is, return. That seems fine, I think. That's is active, and then then we can have, yeah, because then you can say, you know, you want a button to be a child of, you want a button to use the, to be in an axis mapping, and then just set the scalar or something. I don't know exactly, but anyway, is scalar active, get rid of that. And then we also don't want this axis thing anymore, we can just have button. We can then put the axis one in here. Say input device, and then Xbox axis. S key is not initialized in this constructor. Let's initialize it then, shall we? In device, the code being axis, which will be a static cast to int from code. No, axis, not code. And then this we can just call it amounts. Actually, no, wait, we don't even need this scalar thing because we have the scalar amount here is fine. So actually no, we could have like the target scalar or something. The is pressed checks on just if the button is pressed. So I'm thinking we have a separate structure for an action. So we have a key axis and then a key action, and keep them two separate. And then say have that. And then the is pressed and stuff can be in here instead. So now we just have the simple key which holds the type of device that we're using, a keyboard, mouse, controller, and the code of the input. If it's, you know, the A button, the X, the, you know, right bumper, or the left mouse button kind of thing. And then these specific implementations will decide how that's handled. So you can say, you know, it will be an action, and then that action you can check if it's pressed or not, or if it's an axis you can say if the scalar amount is thingy or whatever. And then I suppose that means you can continue to have them all in like one thing. No. Let's say this would be key action, and then have another map for key axis. Call it axes. And then we can say, get rid of these, is action pressed, let's say. This is action pressed. Should be fine, I think. Yeah, we look through actions, we get the key action, see if it's pressed or not. And then we want to say, is axis active? And then do a loop through the axes. I think what we could do is say if action exists, or actually axis exists, if axis exists, and if it doesn't exist, then return false. However, if it does exist, then we can just return get axes at axis, not return it, but instead loop through it. Oh yeah, with this axis being say axis value. Actually, axis key would be, wouldn't it? Yeah. We can then say if axis key dot is active, then return true, and then return false if not. Because is active is obviously going to be if the dead zone, if it's above the dead zone or whatever. The dead zone by default can be like 0.1 or something. So then obviously add key to action. Let's just get rid of this and maybe even add action. This will be key action. There we go. And we'd want to call it action mapping as well. Then add axis mapping. And then this one will just be a wrapper, add axis mapping, move the name in, and then just construct a vector, which will move the key in. So in here we can say if axis exists, get the axes at name, set it equal to the keys. However, if it doesn't exist, then we try and place it, move the name in with the keys. Okay, like that. So now we can put these as no discard. Put these as no discard as well. So is action pressed, is axis active, adding them, seeing if they exist, and then getting the values of them as well. So we're going to no discard this. Actually no, is action pressed, this is already a thing, we just want to see the value of the action, of the axis. Get axis value. We can obviously say, you know, if it exists, axis exists. If it doesn't exist, then do that. But if it does exist, then we need to loop through it and say get axes at axis. We want some kind of, you know, call it, just call it result, I suppose. Say if axis key dot get scalar amount is greater than result, then we say result equals the axis key. Let's just say new results is going to be this. Let's say new result is greater than it, then we just say this equals a new result. Make it const. And yeah, naming as well, and then we can return result like that. Cool. This is what STD ranges any of. I'm good, thanks. I'm fine with a classic for loop. So we're getting the axis value. This will just get whatever the max value is. Then you have two separate ones. The problem is now, how would you add, for example, an axis to go to move left and right based on the D-pad left and right? How would you do that? You would go over to your main, you would get rid of all of this, you would say add axis mapping, we want to call it move x, and we want to say key axis. Let's actually make an array of these. Key axis, and this wants a device and an Xbox axis. Now obviously it's not actually inheriting the constructors of its parent. Yeah, now the easy way to do this would be to just have one thing here of like unique pointers to just key, right, the parent class, and then or struct, and then have a, you know, is active virtual method here, or pure method even, so that this is an interface. And then these will just implement it based on if it's beyond the dead zone, then say it's active. If it's pressed, say it's active. And then you can just do it like that. That's probably the easiest way, I'm gonna be honest. But I don't just want to rely on, you know, inheritance. I'm kind of doing that already, but that's just to save copy and pasting whatever's in here. So we want the input device. This can be a controller, and yeah, we want to the Xbox axis. We want D-pad X. And then we can say is axis active, that, get rid of these, we'll say get the axis value of that. This will just return a float. Yeah, return the float. Yeah, so moving left and right, we get the value of this axis, multiply it by speed and delta time. So this could be positive or negative, meaning we can move left and right freely. So if this works, which I think it will, the only problem is adding a key to it. Because how do we add a key to it? We would need to have another one here, which would be, you know, Xbox button or whatever. And also then adding in, because it would accept any kind of input. The problem is this specifically works with joysticks. Whether we know it's active or not is because it's a joystick. So I'm thinking we just go down the route of inheritance. The problem is I don't want every key to be heap allocated or like dynamically allocated, because it's slower. And they're small enough to the point where it doesn't need to be. This is only 8, I don't know, bytes. This is going to be bigger, yeah, 16, but this is probably only going to be 8. Yeah, so like, it's like the size of a pointer itself. I want to see actually, this is key pressed, is about a key, that's about a button, that's about an unsigned int. The code could probably be an unsigned int, right? I don't know, it doesn't really matter. Ints are quite small anyway, I think, so. Yeah, so I just don't know how to be able to mix the left and right arrow keys into the single move X, move left and right thing. I might have to take a look at Unreal again, because Unreal's old one, in the editor at least, you had the drop down of the axis mappings, you could add a new one, you'd call it something, and you would add keys to it, and then in those keys you would say what the value is. So I'm thinking you don't have this class, you have the pressed and stuff in here, it's just that pressed won't actually do anything if it's an axis. Then this will be used for this one, the base class will be used for actions. So the axis is essentially extending off of a button. It's a button with range. So then you can say if a button is pressed, it's 1, and if it's not pressed, you can just then specify if it's 1 or if it's, you know, 0.5 or -1 or something, like the target scalar. So you could probably say, you know, key axis you know, Xbox button, for example. As well as the target scalar value. And then just do the thing. So the device, the static cast to int from in device. I don't. What is this complaining about? What you're on about is not a member of initialized class. Okay, well, whatever. In device and then static cast to an int from button. And then we say target scalar is equal to in target scalar. And then the target scalar thing yeah, you can then say get scalar amount. You can say if it's pressed, is pressed, return the target scalar. If it's not pressed, then see if, then test for this, and if this fails, then return whatever. That might be the better idea, I think. And then these will just be normal S keys. And then up here we have the is pressed function, which I just copy this. So then we can say if it's pressed, return the target scalar. If it's not, do that. And then we can also say if it's active, if it's pressed, return true. If it's not pressed, then check for the scalar, which we're actually already checking for here, so we don't actually need to do that. We can just leave it as this. So that means that is action pressed, we just check if it's pressed or not. Is axis active, we are checking if it is currently active, meaning it's either pressed if it's a key or it's above the dead zone. So hopefully this should work now. We just need to add the things here as well, because obviously, you know, key axis, input device, in device, int code. Although code's going to be hiding, so we want to do encode instead. Say S key in device encode. And then we can also have, you know, stuff like this where it's like the Xbox button but not the axis. Then just say key is in device, and then we static cast to an int from the button. So everything comes back to this constructor basically, which is kind of good. So down here we can say, you know, we want the D-pad, but we can also say we want a keyboard we want the SF keyboard right and that to be 1, and we actually want to, where is it, this, have a target scalar value as well, which will be somewhere here. And this means that this, instead of having the key, it can just say key axis in device static cast to int from the button, and then take in the target scalar like that. So all of the keys or boolean things or actions will all come back to this, and each axis can just be done individually. And then we can have this again, but for left. And -1. So hopefully this means that when we press right, this will become active, because the dead zone is going to be 0.1, and obviously 1 is above 0.1. Then we move 1 multiplied by 100, so we move 100 multiplied by delta time, which is something on the, well, to the right, because it's positive. Left will just be the same thing but negative. And then the D-pad will just do left and right for us because it's an axis. So right moves, left doesn't, and the D-pad just makes it disappear. Okay, that's not quite what we want. So what's going on? I think it's probably to do with the way I'm using absolute. Dead zone doesn't need to be absoluted. And where else am I using abs? It's just here, okay. And it's not saying it or anything, so that should be fine. Get axis value. Ah, we want the absolute of the axis value, of the scalar value as well. Just to see which one's higher, because obviously if you're going left, then that's probably why the left button didn't work. I don't know about the D-pad still, but this should fix the left button. No, left just moves right, and the D-pad still makes it disappear. Yeah, so because we're absoluting it, we're losing the negative. Meaning we don't know. Yeah, meaning everything just moves right, instead of us knowing if we're left or right or not. So, I don't know off the top of my head how to fix this, because obviously we need to be able to tell if it's positive or negative. We could probably just have a pointer actually. Instead of doing that, we could, what is it? It's a key axis. Call it like axis pointer. And then instead of saying result equals new result, we could do that. But we also want to do axis pointer is then equal to the address of axis key. And just return axis pointer get scalar amount. So every time we check for if it's if it's better than the last result or not. So this new result checks for the last result. If it's greater than the last result, then we set the last result to equal it, and set the axis pointer to equal it. to equal the actual key, and then we can just query the genuine scalar amount for it. Now, we also want to check if it's valid or not after this. Because if it's not valid, meaning we never actually set it in this for loop, then we would just want to return 0. So hopefully that should fix it. It's probably not the most optimized way, but it's what I thought up of immediately. So yeah, we have a left and right guy. It favors the right key more than the left for some reason. So if I'm holding left and then I start holding right without letting go of left, it goes right. But if I'm holding right and I press left, it doesn't go left because right is got a higher priority or something. So I'm not exactly sure how that's determined. It might just be the order of these. Yes, it's the order of those. Whichever one comes first has the higher priority. And the D-pad just goes super fast. Ah, I know why it goes super fast. I know why it goes super fast. Because I didn't normalize it. In SFML, the value of an axis is from minus 100 to 100. So this is basically 100 times what it should be. So get scalar amounts. This result needs to be normalized or just multiplied by like 0.01 to make it to what it should be. So now the D-pad works fine. That's good. It works. It just works like that. That's brilliant. So now we have axes or axes which have scalar values. I can add one for move Y as well, which will have the D-pad Y and up and down, which should be reversed. Actually, up should be negative. There we go. Let's call this one down because obviously I've done right and left here and not left and right. So, and then we can check for that here as well. For if we move Y, then get the value of move Y and put this on the Y instead of the X. So now hopefully, there we go, we have you know, decent feeling input. Our D-pad's inverted, but you know, that does work. How do we fix the inverted D-pad? I don't know, probably. You know what? We could use this target scale as a target scalar as a multiplier, right? We can multiply it by the target scalar. I just set it to 1 by default. And then bring it back to the key axis here for the in device. We can static cast to an int the axis and then specify the in target scalar like that. And then that in turn goes up to this one. So that means that in here we can say we want it to be 1. But this one, we want it to be -1. So the D-pad Y will be negated. Would you look at that? It does work just like that. Nice. This is entirely on the D-pad of my Xbox controller I'm doing this on. Now I'm doing it on the arrow keys. Now the arrow keys, I don't like the fact that right favours left and down favours up and stuff, because it feels a bit weird when you're going around pressing multiple of them at once and you're like, I expect it to stop, but it actually keeps going. So yeah, what I want is to do some kind of maths to you know, basically stop the input, take the result scalar to 0 if left and right, if like -1 and 1 are both active, or like, you know, subtract the, you know, 1 from the -1, or well, add them together. Yeah, add them together or something, or subtract something like that, so that you get then the difference or something, and then that difference is then returned as the get axis value. Because obviously we do know the 2 or more things, so it would just be a case of doing something else in this for loop. So not just getting the highest result, getting the difference of all of the results or something. I don't know. I'm going to put a to do here. To do, instead of getting highest result, get a sum of all of them to stop right favouring left, etc. Instead just returning 0 if right and left are both down. Something like that. Okay, so we have that, and I also just quickly want to test the action mappings, where we can just say move right, for example. And we just want to have a key, and this key can have input device being keyboard, and the actual key being the SF keyboard, D, let's say. And then we also want another one where the input device is a controller, and we want a Xbox button, and let's say we want B to be moving to the right. So now obviously we've got to see if it's down, is action pressed, then move right. Then we can move on the X speed multiplied by delta time, like that. So now if I press B, we move right. If I press D, I've pressed them at the same time, it goes at the same speed. Nice. So that's our actions, our one-time inputs for if it's down or not, and then we have our axes, which is just doing that basically. So we could have a, I do quickly want to see the, this might not actually work, but I want to see the left thumbstick X and left thumbstick Y, because I want to see how the dead zone pans out as well. It's not the D-pad, it's on the thumbstick. And this actually is already inverted, so it's at the normal thing. And now it's on the thumbstick and you can see it's not bound to whatever the thing is. The problem is the dead zone isn't done via a vector 2D, it's done via axes individually. So even though the dead zone does work, I think even when it's full locked down, the dead zone for the x-axis is still in effect. So you can see it's not super smooth. Well, yeah, it would be a lot more jarring if we had a larger dead zone, so if it was like 0.5. I really need some kind of way to visualize the kind of direction of the joystick, but yeah, so this is a lot further out from the middle, but you can see it snap quite a lot when we, you know, go up from moving left completely. Because the dead zone, when you're moving full lock right, the dead zone for the y-axis up and down is still there, so you've got to move it a lot more up to be able to start going up. You don't want that, you instead just want a dead zone focused on the center of the 2D axis instead of having, you know, this one for both axes or whatever. So yeah, versus no dead zone, which would probably, you know, continually offset it by a little amount even though you're not actually moving the stick. Yeah, so I'm not touching the stick at the moment. I don't know if that's stick drift or whatever, but it's currently just moving by itself because the stick is slightly off center. That's why dead zones are so good. So if I have the dead zone, put it back in, then that will stop happening because the value of the joystick is below the dead zone. Yeah, so it's not moving anymore until I kind of move the joystick. So we have dead zones, we have joystick stuff, D-pad stuff, and as well as a multiplier, a scale multiplier. I should probably call it a scale multiplier versus a, whatever I called it, a target scalar. Scale multiplier. It's probably what it's called in Unreal as well. I should probably just right click and no, not generate. Refactor, rename, here we go, scale multiplier. In scale multiplier. In scale multiplier. There we go. So yeah, the scale multiplier makes a lot more sense, or like magnitude or something like that. That kind of thing makes a lot more sense for this thing instead of target scalar, which doesn't really make sense. So this is saying as a definition with different parameter names. I don't think it does. They're all the same. I think you're just a bit out of date, Ryder. Anyway, so input works. That's good. I know that collision also works. I can probably show that quite quickly if I make just a base entity here and move this off to like 16 or something. And then override the collision thing and say, you know, colliding or something, or like colliding with other dot get class name. Which, by the way, that was another thing I did. I made a class registry thing, which lets you instantiate any kind of quote-unquote class that's registered with it just via its string class name. So basically you register it and they need to inherit from serializable because it's like JSON stuff and things. It's like very basic reflection stuff. And then you can just register class, you can instantiate the class via just its class name. This is only templated because it casts to the specified type, but you can instantiate class just from that. And the level as well actually has a method to spawn entity, and you can spawn it from the class name. So you can say, you know, see entity and whatever. And this I think will probably show up in the world as well. So yeah, there you go. So you can see it's colliding with, the thing isn't showing up, but yeah, there you go. So now it's saying colliding with entity, because I think the get class name, the variable that it's referencing or whatever, isn't set unless it's spawned via the text version. I think that's something I still need to work out and fix, but yeah, you can see that it is colliding and stuff, and it's all working well, and I can delete them. I can say other dot destroy, and then it will just destroy it when I collide with it. There you go, he's gone. He's gone. The game still runs and everything, so there's no kind of, you know, crashing and weird vector, you know, the array is out of bounds or whatever. So that's all good. Yeah, so collisions do work, and stuff like that. Obviously, optimizing collisions and stuff is a big thing, and I would need to do that, but not for now. For now, it's just basic stuff. Audio Manager does work as well. I know that. I don't have any sound to play, but you have different play sound methods. I still don't know exactly how I'm going to do this, and I also, because obviously, you know, you can see I don't know exactly what the limitations that I'm targeting with the audio is and stuff, but also the asset cache as well. I want to try and kind of remake the asset cache, because currently what it does is it just holds weak pointers to the shared pointers that it gives out. When you get an asset or you load it, it returns a shared pointer to whatever the asset is, right? So the asset cache doesn't own the assets that it loads. The thing that's using them owns them. So you have, you know, 3 sprites that all use the same texture. They all own that texture memory, but it's the same memory that they own because it's a shared pointer. So what the cache does is it just sees, okay, we have 3 references to it, therefore it's fine. As soon as one of the sprites doesn't need it anymore, it gets deleted. The cache is like, okay, it's been deleted, but we still have 2 other references, so it's fine, we can keep it in the map. As soon as the other 2 sprites are done with their things, they change level or whatever, then the cache is like, okay, we don't have any more uses, we can erase it from the map, and that's all good. The problem is, if you load an asset without immediately saving it into a shared pointer variable somewhere else, that shared pointer will get destroyed at the end of the scope, and your asset will be destroyed, will be erased from the map, because obviously there's no shared pointers pointing to it. So that means that if you're loading an asset in, you have to make sure that you save the returned asset into a shared pointer somewhere, and that wherever you're loading it now owns it, because this cache doesn't own the assets, which I'm thinking of changing. I kind of want the cache to own the assets, but then that means it needs to have some kind of information on the context of the kind of asset in use. And if it's a global thing like it is now, with it being static and stuff, you know, a singleton, that's going to be quite hard. So I'm thinking just completely redesign it so that you can have caches anywhere. You can just make a cache object, and it will just give you, you know, the functionality to load something from disk, load it from JSON or whatever. And when the cache gets destroyed, all of the assets get destroyed with it. Because currently, if this cache got destroyed, the assets that are loaded wouldn't get destroyed because the cache doesn't own it. But it's a singleton. It won't get destroyed until the game, or until the program closes. So it's kind of pointless to have it not own them. So I'm a bit confused in how I should go about it. Obviously I don't want to use a singleton because singletons aren't amazing, but it just made sense to have a singleton here I think initially, but now I'm thinking I just want to have it be, you know, just an object that you can create. And obviously levels will have their own asset caches, so that when you you know, when you load a new level and you go into it, the old one just automatically gets destroyed. All of the assets to do with it get destroyed. The difference is you might have like the player sprite or something, the player that persists throughout different levels. You might want the player's data to not get destroyed when you close the level. So, you know, I'm gonna keep it like this just in case, because obviously, yeah, that's also why in the audio manager I have this current sound variable, because I was testing it and I was playing a sound via like this or something, this function here, and what was happening was obviously you would load it and then you would set the buffer to, you know, the current, well, not the current sound, this wasn't being set, you would just set it to the assets, like, you know, actual value, and it just wouldn't play, because at the end of this scope, at the end of the scope, the sound asset data gets destroyed because it's a shared pointer, and then it gets erased from the map, meaning every time you try and play a sound, it just won't play anything. It will load it and then unload it immediately afterwards. So the audio manager owns the current sound being played, which isn't all that bad. It doesn't really matter, I suppose. It's just a bit annoying. I also need to work out how to do the music, because obviously in the end I want to be able to load assets just via their IDs. I don't want to be loading via the path in C++. I want to have some kind of thing where in JSON you can say, okay, map all of these paths to these asset IDs, and then just load an ID and it will know from the JSON to load via this path. That's kind of the end goal. That'd be nice, but for now it's just loading from path in C++. I almost said in the editor, so there is no editor. But yeah, so that's it so far really. There's font assets. There's, oh yes, UI stuff works quite well. I had this padding structure. The UI stuff does work quite well. I'm not sure exactly the kind of exact way I'm gonna like go about it, but for now we have widgets, we have containers. Children of widgets are prefixed with W and not C, because you might have like a text widget which is going to be called W text, but you might also have an entity widget text which would just be called C text. So, you know, C text and C text, they both are called the same thing, even though one's a widget and one's an entity, still called the same thing. So I think it just makes sense to do that. And if I go into widget, you'll see, you know, W to avoid naming clashes. Yeah, so the entity is basically like the widget is basically like an entity, but just for widgets. And the engine has a separate thing for that. Like it draws. Where is it? Where's the draw? This. It draws the viewport after the world. So there's a separate viewport in the engine here, which manages all the UI stuff, and this W viewport is actually a child of container, which is a child of widget. So yeah, everything kind of is in itself. I could add some UI here actually. I could get the viewport and then this does return a reference, right? Yeah, of course it does. We can create child and then create some W text, and then we also want to save it as a thing, just call it text. Then we can, you know, font and stuff. I actually, instead of this, let me do something quickly. Here we want to say W where is it? Vertical container. Call it VBox or something. And then we also want text. Let's call it pos text. I'm just going to have text that displays your position, and also whenever we destroy something, we want to say VBox create child, some text, and set text. Actually, I don't know if the font is set automatically. We don't actually have our font, so let's say text, set text to be destroyed, and then, like, you know, other dot get class name, and set font, and we need the asset cache here to load a font. We can just call it text, and I don't know, just give it some whatever path. I need to get a font as well, but so then in our spawn, it could be in the constructor. It probably should be in the constructor. I can't actually remember if it's allowed in the constructor. I don't know. I'm just doing this. This should probably be public. This can all be public. Doesn't really matter. So we want to set VBox equal to no, it can't, because we need to get the engine and the outer hasn't been set. We should do it in spawn. This will be fine. So we can set VBox equal to get engine dot get viewport dot create child, and we want to create a vertical container. And then here in VBox we can create child, create some text, and set pos text equal to it. We can say pos text, set font to be, once again, the C asset cache load font. I don't know what font exactly, but we can just call it font, because then this will load this is called text. Let's call it font. It will load the same one. It won't load it twice because it's already exists, so it won't load it again. And then that's got a font now, so in here we can just say pos text, set text to be the tails s vector 2f 2string, and then we can have the get position. There we go. Because I have my own vector which can basically stringify, where is it? 2string, yeah, stringify you know, an SFML vector, which is fine because we have an operator to go from this vector to an SFML vector, so it's implicit, it all just works. So there you go. So now all we need to do is simply get a font. And if you're wondering, create child, the children is a unique pointer, so all of the children are managed in the container. So this create child thing, this VBox memory is actually owned by the viewport, this text is owned by the VBox, that kind of thing. So you can just have raw pointers and it will all be fine, or references or whatever, doesn't really matter. So we just need a font. Let's get a font. Got this Dogica font TTF. Let's get that, and let's just get this one. Here we go. And let's say we want Dogica.ttf. Actually, we could do that here, and then in here, get asset. We could just get the font. But obviously we need to have it as a certain type, so we could say tails C font asset, like that. So we could just get via the ID. And now hopefully it should work. Font asset is an undefined class. Let's make it defined then. Okay, we have our position, we destroyed the entity, we destroyed nothing, and there you go. So they stack on top of each other because it's a vertical box. Our position is working just fine. And yeah, it shows properly, things like that. There is also padding we can do. VBox, we have set child padding. We can say, you know, none on the top. No, we could do 2 top, none on the left, 2 bottom, and then none on the right. And this will be for every child. So for every child, we'll have 2 top, 2 bottom kind of thing. Because there's no slots in this, you can't have it per child, otherwise you'd have to have every kind of container setting in each child or whatever, and that's just annoying. So, because Unreal Engine uses slots, I was thinking using slots, but that's also just over-engineering it a bit too much. So yeah, there you go, now there's a bit of padding between them. So I've been working on this basically, this is just what I've been working on over the holiday on the engine. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I quite like it. Yeah, and you can see it erased the font and it erased the player. And if I had another thing, I could. I probably could do this actually. I could probably set texture to be the asset cache load texture. Call it enemy, and I think it's actually called player.png. So the other entities will have this now. Though for some reason I've got it. Oh wait, no, yeah, I've got it because I'm the one that's. Hang on. This is not supposed to be on me. It's supposed to be here. Here we go. There we go. So we've got me, the 2 enemies, and when we destroy both the enemies, it erases the enemy asset because it's no longer in use. So there you go. That's like the kind of dynamic erasing that is quite nice. So the engine works quite well. Obviously there's bugs that I haven't found and stuff, but it's pretty decent for now. Next steps probably be getting the inputs to load from JSON, which probably shouldn't be too hard. Maybe, I don't know, the engine will probably do that. Like the engine class, in part of its initialization or something, it would add all of the mappings and things so that you can then just check here instead of having to add these things to the spawn or whatever. What would be nice is, yeah, one of the reasons why I want to move away from the weak pointers in the asset cache is so that you can load, the level can have a list of the assets to load. And so like the entities and stuff. So when the entity's made, it can be like, this is the assets that you need to load, that you're responsible for. And then it'll go through them, it will load them. But then it'll have to save them somewhere. And obviously, since the asset cache is a weak pointer, it can't save them in the asset cache. So it's got to save it in the level itself, which isn't great. So I don't know exactly how that's going to work. That's one of the reasons why I'm like, you know what, I just want to have it be a unique pointer in the asset cache, and if the asset cache be local to different things and stuff. But anyway, that's the progress of the engine. Nice UI stuff going on with Vertical Box.